We've got some fresh images of 3IATLAS, a third ever interstellar object observed from Earth, currently racing through our solar system.
NASA just released an image it never planned for us to see. An object drifting silently near Jupiter, behaving like no comet in history. No tail, no water, only a massive, unsettling red cloud of gas expanding like a warning. And the question isn't what it is, but what it's hiding. The discovery with SPHEREx. It's August 2025. NASA's brand new infrared telescope, SPHEREx, begins one of the most ambitious surveys of the sky. Its mission? To map the universe in wavelengths invisible to our eyes, revealing everything from the birth of stars to the chemistry of distant galaxies. But in the middle of this massive sweep of the heavens, the telescope finds something far closer and far stranger than anyone expected. At a distance of 2.2 astronomical units from the Sun, roughly the orbit of Jupiter, SPHEREx locks onto an object unlike any it has seen before. It is small, faint, and drifting silently through space. The catalog marks it as 3IATLAS. That name alone is historic. 3I means this is the third interstellar object ever discovered by humanity. Before it, we only knew of two: ʻOumuamua in 2017 and Borisov in 2019. Those discoveries shocked the world because they proved for the first time that visitors from other star systems regularly pass through our solar system. And now Atlas has joined their ranks. At first, astronomers expected it to behave like Borisov, a typical comet, only one that happened to wander into our neighborhood from deep space. After all, comets are predictable. They orbit the sun. Their icy surfaces begin to warm. Water ice sublimates, turns directly into vapor, and a glowing tail of gas and dust streams behind them, painting the blackness of space with light. This is the script comets have always followed. But from the very first observations, it was clear Atlas was not reading from the same script. Instead of a water-rich coma, SPHEREx detected something completely different. Atlas was venting only carbon dioxide. No visible jets of water, no sparkling trail of dust, just a smooth, expanding shell of CO2 surrounding the object. For context, at this distance from the sun, water usually dominates cometary activity. Carbon dioxide is present, yes, but in small amounts, often hidden beneath the overwhelming production of water vapor. Yet, here was an object where the balance was inverted. Water was nearly silent, and CO2 was the only voice. And not just a little CO2, Atlas was releasing it in enormous amounts, unlike anything seen at this distance. That is when astronomers realized this was not going to be a simple repeat of Borisov. This was something new, something unsettling, an interstellar visitor that behaves nothing like the comets we know. And that one fact, the absence of water, the dominance of carbon dioxide, turned Atlas from a minor discovery into one of the most puzzling mysteries NASA has ever recorded. The red coma that breaks the rules. When astronomers first studied 3IATLAS, their eyes weren't drawn to the nucleus, the solid body at its heart, but to the halo of gas surrounding it. What they saw was breathtaking. Atlas was wrapped in a coma nearly 348,000 kilometers across. To put that into perspective, that's almost the distance from Earth to the Moon. Imagine a single object surrounded by a bubble so vast it could swallow our entire planet multiple times over. And unlike the pale, translucent comas we've seen around ordinary comets, this one glowed with a deep, blood-red hue, a halo unlike anything in the catalogs. At first, researchers assumed this was just an amplified version of normal comet behavior. After all, comets produce comas when the sun warms their frozen surfaces. But when the spectral data came back, everything changed. This coma wasn't made of water vapor and dust, the basic ingredients of every comet tail we've ever observed. Instead, it was composed almost entirely of carbon dioxide. That alone is astonishing. At 2.2 astronomical units from the sun, comets are typically dominated by water sublimation. The ice boils directly into gas. Jets burst through the crust, and the outward push of sunlight stretches that gas and dust into the familiar tails we see crossing the sky. Carbon dioxide is usually a minor player at this distance, buried beneath layers of ice released in faint quantities compared to water. But Atlas turns that logic upside down. The data was clear. This object was venting CO2 at a staggering 70 kilograms every second. Imagine the mass of a human body thrown into space every single second, carried away in a silent, invisible stream, and yet no water vapor, no strong dust trail, just CO2. Why? One theory suggests that carbon dioxide, being more volatile than water, is escaping first and acting like a thermal blanket, cooling the surface and preventing the water ice beneath from reaching the critical temperature to sublimate. Another explanation is that the water lies far deeper under the surface, trapped beneath layers of dust and frozen compounds that sunlight simply can't penetrate. But both theories fall short when you look at the coma structure, because here's the most unsettling part. The coma is too symmetrical. Comas are usually chaotic. They twist, expand unevenly, and reveal the violence of gas jetting into space. But Atlas's coma looks different. Smooth, uniform, almost perfectly spherical. It doesn't look like random venting. It looks organized. And astronomers compared it to comets from the Kuiper Belt and even the distant Oort cloud, icy bodies that occasionally produce more CO2 than water. But even those comets don't create a sphere this large, this uniform, and this strangely consistent. One astrophysicist described it as eerily calm, a structure that doesn't match the explosive, unpredictable nature of sublimation. It's as if Atlas is maintaining the coma rather than simply producing it. And that's where the mystery deepens. Because if this coma were entirely natural, we would expect turbulence. We would expect chaotic jets. We would expect signs of water ice finally breaking free, the sun's heat grows stronger. But instead, all we see is the constant exhalation of carbon dioxide. So what exactly is happening here? Is this truly a frozen relic from another star system, behaving in ways our models can't yet explain? Or is this coma hiding something beneath its veil, something more structured, more deliberate than nature alone could create? What we do know is this: a coma of this size and symmetry simply doesn't fit within the physics of what we understand comets to be. And if the coma challenges our models, what we discover about the core will shake them even more. The core that shattered expectations. If the coma of Atlas already challenged our expectations, what scientists found next completely shattered them. Because hidden inside that enormous red shell of gas is the core, the nucleus of the object. And it does not behave like any cometary core we've ever studied. Let's start with the early numbers. When the Hubble Space Telescope first observed 3IATLAS, it estimated a tiny nucleus somewhere between 300 and 500 meters across. That's small, comparable to the interstellar comet Borisov, and consistent with what we'd expect from an icy fragment wandering through space. But when SPHEREx began collecting near-infrared spectra, the readings didn't add up. Instead of a faint, unremarkable body, the telescope detected a huge flux of reflected light at the 1-micron wavelength. The intensity was so strong, so abnormal, that the models had to be run multiple times. Every time, they pointed to the same shocking conclusion. The nucleus of 3IATLAS might not be half a kilometer wide, but closer to 46 kilometers across. That number stunned researchers because a nucleus of that size would make Atlas larger than 90% of the comets we've ever recorded. To put it in perspective, that would be over 1 million times more massive than Borisov. If true, it means Atlas isn't just an interstellar traveler. It's a colossus, a mountain of ice and rock so massive that we should have noticed it much earlier. And that's where the contradictions start. If Atlas really is 46 kilometers across, its gravitational influence alone should have been detectable. It should have bent the light of background stars as it drifted in. Its coma, filled with gauze and possibly dust, should have glowed so brightly that telescopes would have flagged it long before SPHEREx came online. Yet none of that happened. For months, Atlas remained invisible, silent, hidden, until suddenly it wasn't. 2. So maybe the nucleus isn't that massive after all. A second theory emerged. Perhaps almost all of the light SPHEREx detected doesn't come from the core itself, but from microscopic particles suspended in the coma. These particles could reflect sunlight in ways that exaggerate the size of the nucleus. It sounds like a reasonable fix, But then another problem appears, because when astronomers studied the pattern of that reflected light, the reflectivity curve, they found something unexpected. Instead of the jagged, uneven profile of dust scattering sunlight in random directions, the curve looks smooth, too smooth, almost symmetrical. This kind of reflectivity doesn't match a chaotic swarm of particles. It suggests something more uniform, more controlled, more regular, and as if the surface or whatever is reflecting that light is far less random than a natural comet's nucleus should be. Think about that. Either Atlas has a nucleus so massive it should have revealed itself years ago, or the brightness we see is an illusion created by a coma with unnaturally symmetrical reflectivity. Neither option makes sense. Cometary nuclei are supposed to be rough, irregular, scarred by impacts, and shredded by their own outgassing. Their coma should be messy, filled with jets blasting unpredictably into space. Yet Atlas looks almost restrained, and this is why scientists are divided. Is the nucleus truly a frozen giant hiding in plain sight? Or is the core smaller but shrouded by a coma whose symmetry feels less like chaos and more like design? Because if Atlas's coma is structured and its brightness is artificially uniform, then we're not just looking at a comet anymore. We're looking at something that has been arranged, or at the very least, shaped by processes we do not yet understand. The idea unsettles researchers because it leaves us in a place science rarely likes to be, suspended between two impossible explanations: a core too big to hide, or a reflection too perfect to be natural. So which is it? That's the riddle of Atlas's heart. And solving it might be the key to understanding whether this is a comet at all or something entirely different: the water that refuses to appear. If Atlas's coma was already strange and its nucleus bordering on impossible, what came next made astronomers question the very foundation of comet science. Because there is one element every comet should reveal as it nears the sun, an element so essential, so defining that without it, the very word comet loses its meaning. That element is water. Comets are often described as dirty snowballs, mixtures of rock, dust, and frozen ices, with water being the dominant component. As a comet approaches the sun, that water should heat up, sublimate into vapor, and drive spectacular jets that push dust and gas into space. It is water that creates the bright comas and iconic tails we see in the night sky. But in the case of 3IATLAS, water is strangely absent. Spectral data confirms that water ice is indeed present inside Atlas. It's there, mixed with carbon dioxide and organic compounds, frozen like a memory from another star system. And yet, despite being so close to the sun, at 2.2 astronomical units, very little of it is escaping. For context, a comet at this distance should typically release 40 to 50 kilograms of water vapor every second. That's enough to form obvious jets and a shining tail visible to telescopes on Earth. But Atlas, it's producing just 4.5 kilograms per second, barely a trickle, less than a tenth of the expected activity. Why is the water locked away? Why is it refusing to appear? One explanation is that the intense outgassing of carbon dioxide is cooling the comet's surface. In theory, the CO2 could act like a natural refrigerator, forming a thin, icy frost that insulates the water below and prevents it from sublimating. Imagine a thermal blanket trapping the water deeper down. Another theory suggests that Atlas's water lies much farther beneath the surface, buried under thick layers of dust and frozen carbon compounds. If that's true, sunlight simply cannot reach it. The ice remains untouched, sealed away in darkness. But here's the catch: even these explanations feel incomplete, because Atlas isn't just quiet, it's too quiet. No chaotic eruptions, no bursts of mixed gases, no signs of water slowly breaking through. Instead, it releases carbon dioxide with an almost mechanical consistency, while its water remains silent. Some scientists have started to wonder if the chemistry of Atlas's surface is simply different, alien. Perhaps it formed in conditions far removed from those in our solar system, conditions that produced a body whose balance of ices doesn't follow any of our models. Others, however, point to something more unsettling. What if Atlas isn't releasing water because it's not supposed to? What if the coma of carbon dioxide is deliberately masking the presence of water, hiding its true makeup beneath a deceptive veil? Because in nature, silence can be as telling as noise. And the silence of water on Atlas grows more suspicious with every observation. Think about it. The coma is almost perfectly symmetrical, unlike the messy chaos of most comets. The nucleus may be far larger or far smaller than we can explain. And now water, the most basic signature of a comet, is missing in action. When you add it all together, it begins to feel less like the random quirks of a frozen rock and more like a pattern, a design. Atlas isn't behaving like a comet trying to wake up. It's behaving like something hiding in plain sight, something wrapped in silence, as if it doesn't want to reveal its true nature. And that's the most disturbing thought of all, because if Atlas isn't just a natural outlier, if the missing water isn't a coincidence, then what exactly is this object doing as it drifts closer to the sun? The answer to that question might explain why NASA has been so quiet about Atlas in the first place. And as we'll see next, their silence is perhaps the most suspicious anomaly of all. NASA's silence, coincidence or control? For most of us, when NASA makes a discovery of cosmic importance, the announcement is loud. There are press releases, interviews, and headlines splashed across major outlets. Remember ʻOumuamua, the very first interstellar object in 2017? It was everywhere within days of its detection. Even Borisov, just 2 years later, was covered widely as a true interstellar comet. But with Atlas, the story is different. SPHEREx collected its first data on Atlas in early August 2025. The telescope captured clear signatures of the massive carbon dioxide coma, the strange absence of water, and the unusual reflectivity that hinted at a nucleus beyond the ordinary. This should have been the kind of discovery NASA celebrated with front-page visibility. Instead, what happened? Nothing. For weeks, the data remained silent. No press conference, no splashy announcement, no media coverage at all. Only later, buried in an obscure blog update on NASA's site, did the information finally surface. There was no urgency, no fanfare, just a quiet note, as if this were routine, unremarkable, almost not worth mentioning. And that silence raises questions. Why would NASA sit on data this strange, this potentially groundbreaking, for so long? Some argue that it's standard protocol. You don't release preliminary findings until they've been double-checked, peer-reviewed, and verified. Others claim it's about caution. NASA didn't want to spark unnecessary speculation before the numbers were solid. But then again, Atlas is not a routine object. This is only the third interstellar visitor we've ever seen. The mere fact of its existence is historic. So why the quiet rollout? Why the downplaying? For a small but vocal group of astronomers, this pattern feels uncomfortably familiar. Because back in 2017, when ʻOumuamua raced through the solar system, something similar happened. ʻOumuamua didn't behave like a comet. It showed no trail of gas, no visible jets, no dust at all. Yet somehow it accelerated slightly but measurably, as if something unseen was pushing it. Astronomers struggled to explain it. Many leaned on exotic natural models, while others, like Harvard's Avi Loeb, openly suggested that it could be a piece of alien technology, perhaps a light sail drifting through interstellar space. NASA and most of the scientific community dismissed that interpretation as far-fetched. The mainstream narrative leaned heavily toward natural explanations. But the fact remains, ʻOumuamua broke the rules, and its mysteries remain unsolved. Now with Atlas, the parallels are haunting. Another interstellar visitor, another body that refuses to fit our cometary models, another object released to the public only after delay and only in the quietest possible way. Coincidence? Protocol? Or something else? Maybe NASA truly is just being careful. Maybe the agency doesn't want to ignite the kind of public frenzy that surrounded ʻOumuamua. Or maybe the truth is less comforting, that they know Atlas is more than just a comet and they aren't ready to admit it. Whatever the case, the silence itself has become part of the mystery. Because when it comes to objects that shouldn't exist, what isn't said can be as revealing as what is. And if NASA is holding back, then the question becomes, what do they know about Atlas that we don't? Radical hypotheses. Is Atlas technology? By this point, Atlas had already broken nearly every rule in the cometary handbook. A coma made almost entirely of carbon dioxide, a core that seemed either impossibly massive or deceptively reflective, and a silence from NASA that felt less like routine caution and more like deliberate restraint. So naturally, the question arises, if Atlas isn't behaving like a comet, then what is it? The majority of astronomers, of course, lean toward conservative answers. They argue that Atlas is still a natural body, just an extreme outlier. Science, after all, thrives on exceptions. Every once in a while, nature throws us a curveball, and Atlas might simply be one of those anomalies. According to this camp, the unusual CO2 activity could be explained if Atlas formed in an environment where carbon dioxide was far more abundant than water. Perhaps in its home system, icy bodies developed with different ratios of volatile compounds, leaving Atlas unusually rich in carbon dioxide and poor in surface water. Others suggest that our models of cometary behavior at these distances are still incomplete. Maybe Atlas is teaching us that comets from other star systems follow rules we haven't yet discovered. In this view, Atlas isn't artificial. It's a messenger, but one of natural diversity rather than technology. That explanation comforts many. But not everyone is convinced, because the more you look at Atlas, the more it begins to feel less like an accident of nature and more like something engineered. Let's start with the symmetry of the coma. Natural comets vent gas chaotically. Jets burst from cracks, sending plumes of vapor in uneven directions. Their halos wobble, expand irregularly, and reveal the violence of sublimation. Yet Atlas's coma appears smooth, stable, almost perfectly spherical. To some researchers, that doesn't resemble an outgassing rock. It resembles containment. Then there is the reflectivity curve of the nucleus. The light bouncing off Atlas is not jagged and messy, as we'd expect from a body coated in fractured ice and dust. Instead, it looks uniform, consistent, almost polished. That kind of signal is difficult to reconcile with a random natural object tumbling through space. And the missing water, the silence of the very ingredient that defines comets. For skeptics, this is the loudest signal of all. They argue that Atlas might not be hiding its water by accident. It might be suppressing it, masking it, concealing its true composition beneath a red shroud of carbon dioxide. Taken together, these anomalies have led a small but vocal minority of scientists to float more radical possibilities. Among them is Avi Loeb, the Harvard astrophysicist who famously argued that ʻOumuamua could be an artificial probe. He points to Atlas's symmetry, its unusual trajectory, and its missing tail, and suggests that this object might not be a comet at all. Not proof of alien life, but proof of alien technology. Think about that. We're not talking about biology, we're talking about engineering. Something made, not formed. Something designed, not accidental. Could Atlas be a fragment of a larger structure? A derelict craft disguised as a comet? A probe built to harvest or vent gas in ways we don't understand? Of course, these ideas remain controversial, even fringe. Most of the scientific community still leans toward natural explanations, but history has taught us that extraordinary discoveries often begin as fringe ideas. And the fact is, it only takes one object, one visitor that defies the limits of natural explanation. One anomaly that refuses to fit the models. If Atlas is natural, then it's a puzzle that will force us to rewrite our understanding of interstellar comets. But if Atlas is something more, something artificial, then it's a discovery that changes everything. Because it would mean we are not the only ones building in the dark. We are not the only engineers of the cosmos. Somewhere out there, another intelligence may have left its fingerprints drifting through our solar system, wrapped in a veil of silence and doubt. So as Atlas drifts closer to the sun, toward its moment of truth, we are left with two possibilities. Either it is the strangest comet ever seen, or it is the first undeniable sign that we are not alone. And whichever answer turns out to be true, one thing is certain: Atlas is not done surprising us. Final reflection: a comet or a message? So here we are. After months of observation, thousands of data points, and endless speculation, Atlas still refuses to reveal its truth. We see a coma that is too wide, too symmetrical, and made almost entirely of carbon dioxide. We see a core that is either impossibly massive or mysteriously reflective. We see water ice locked away, silent when it should be the loudest voice. And we see a delay in communication from NASA that only deepens the mystery. Piece by piece, Atlas looks less like a predictable comet and more like an unsolved riddle drifting through our solar system. But maybe that's the point. Sometimes mysteries in astronomy are temporary. As more data comes in, the models sharpen, the explanations emerge, and what once looked impossible suddenly becomes clear. That could very well be the fate of Atlas, just another outlier that eventually will fit into the natural catalog of interstellar visitors. Or maybe not. Maybe this is one of those rare cases where the closer we look, the stranger it becomes, where every answer leads to another question, where the silence itself speaks louder than the signals we detect. Because Atlas hasn't given us a tail. It hasn't given us the expected chaos of sublimating water. It hasn't even given us the comfort of fitting into any category we know. Instead, it just drifts forward, venting CO2 like a machine with a single steady rhythm. Calm, deliberate, almost rehearsed. And it's that deliberateness that unsettles so many observers. Is this just a comet with unusual chemistry forged in a star system unlike our own? Or is it something else? An object designed, not born. A piece of technology wrapped in a veil of ice carrying secrets we can barely guess at. Right now, no one can say for sure. And maybe that uncertainty is the most important clue of all, because the truth about Atlas might not be in what it shows us, but in what it refuses to show. So we watch, we wait, we measure every spectrum, track every flicker of light, follow every strange clue it leaves behind. Because at the edge of mystery is where discovery lives. And with Atlas, that discovery could be natural. It could be technological. It could even be something we don't yet have the language to describe. But one thing is certain. Whatever Atlas turns out to be, this story is far from over. And if you think this is strange, trust me. What comes next makes Atlas look almost ordinary. What comes next? And while we search the skies for answers, some discoveries are right here, crafted for minds like yours. In the Stellar Path store, we've handpicked telescopes, binoculars, galaxy projectors, apparel, and more. Tools designed to bring the universe a little closer. To make your journey easier, we've organized our optical gear into 4 clear categories based on budget, experience, and what you're looking to explore. Whether you're just starting out or deep into the cosmos, there's a perfect fit waiting for you. Tap the link below to explore objects you can see through, wear proudly, and make part of your everyday orbit. Because discovery doesn't end with the stars. Sometimes it begins at home.